The vast chamber of the Galactic Commons was a masterpiece of cosmic architecture, a shimmering dome where light from 100 different stars was filtered into a soft, neutral glow. Representatives from dozens of species floated or sat at their respective consoles, a living tapestry of the galaxy's intelligence. The air hummed with a low thrum of translated chatter and diplomatic procedure. It was a place for debate, for compromise, for the slow, careful dance of interstellar politics. Today, the dance had stopped. A horrible silence had swallowed the chamber, broken only by the crackling, fragmented signal playing over the central holographic array. The images were grainy, shot from a shaking device. They showed rolling violet fields under a gentle amber sun, and they showed the end of a world. Sleek, insectoid ships descended, their silhouettes like jagged knives against the sky. Beams of cold green light lanced down, not to destroy buildings, but to capture the fleeing figures. The Gentari were a peaceful, bovine-like people, their faces gentle and expressive. Now, those faces were twisted in pure, uncomprehending terror. The audio was worse, the soft, panicked bleats of the Gentari, and the harsh, clicking gutturals of their attackers. A crawl harvest ship filled the frame, its bony protrusions grasping a struggling Gentari elder before the feed cut to static. The final, clear transmission in Galactic Common echoed in the quiet. This is Melody 7 Agricultural Colony. We are under attack by crawl forces. They are taking us. They are harvesting us. Our defenses are non-existent. We beg for aid. Please, anyone. Our coordinates are... The voice, soft and melodic by nature, broke into a sob before the coordinates repeated and the signal died. The Gentari ambassador, a being named Ellerin, stood at the central podium. His large, liquid eyes, usually so calm, were wide with a pain that seemed to radiate from him. His fur trembled. "The Crawl Imperium," Ellerin said, his voice barely a whisper, amplified by the system. "They have violated the Fringe Non-Aggression Accord. They are harvesting my people for their neural tissue. It is a living dissection. We are a people of music and growth. We have no warships, no plasma batteries. We have only our voices to ask for help." A murmur finally rippled through the chamber. The Crawl Imperium was a known entity, a brutally efficient, expansionist power that viewed all other life as either a resource or an obstacle. They had been testing the Commons' resolve for cycles, always staying just outside the lines of outright war, picking on isolated, undefended worlds. Melody 7, a pastoral colony on the galactic fringe, was the perfect target, valuable, helpless, and far from any major military hub. The Telleran representative, a reptilian diplomat with scales the color of tarnished copper, was the first to speak. "Ambassador Ellerin, the profound sorrow of the Commons is with your people." His tone was practiced, diplomatic. "However, Melody 7 is in the side sector. The nearest Commons defense fleet is the 3rd Protectorate, stationed at Glyphon. By the time they could mobilize and travel the necessary distance, the operation would be long concluded. A tactical response is, with profound regret, logistically impossible." Another voice, the melodic chirp of the Avixi, joined in. "We must consider the broader implications. A direct military confrontation with the Crawl could ignite a war across 3 sectors. Millions, billions could die. Is it right to risk so many for so few?" The debate unfurled like a slow, sickening play. Arguments of resource allocation, of political capital, of strategic deterrence were laid upon the table. Each point was logically sound, coldly rational. It was the mathematics of tragedy. The Gentari were not a strategic ally. They offered little in trade or technology. Saving them was, from a purely galactic political standpoint, a net loss. Ellerin listened, his head bowing lower with each passing moment. The hope that had flickered in his eyes when he sent the distress call was being extinguished, smothered under the weight of realpolitik. He saw the pity in the eyes of the other ambassadors, and it was worse than contempt. Pity meant they had already decided to do nothing. "I understand," Ellerin finally said, the words hollow. "The Galactic Commons has its procedures, its limitations. We will await our fate with the dignity we can muster. Thank you for your consideration." He began to turn from the podium, a movement of utter defeat. Wait. The voice was not loud, but it cut through the chamber like a laser. It came from the human delegation station, a relatively new addition to the Commons. The humans had been quiet, observant members, often noted for their curious blend of fierce individuality and strange collectivism. Una Park stood up. She was young for a senior diplomat, her black hair tied back in a simple style, her suit crisp and dark. Her face, usually composed in a mask of polite attentiveness, was now pale with a controlled fury. She looked not at the council, but directly at Ellerin. "You are debating logistics and politics," Una said, her basic galactic clear and sharp. "You are talking about resource expenditure and strategic fallout." She took a step forward, her gaze sweeping the room. "Down there, on Melody 7, the Crawl are not debating. They are selecting children. They are deciding which living beings to strap to tables and take apart while their hearts are still beating. They are measuring screams per lighter." The Tellerin representative hissed softly. "Diplomat Park, your emotionalism is noted, but it does not change the tactical reality. We grieve, but we cannot act." "We?" Una asked, the word hanging in the air. "The Galactic Commons may not have a mandate to act. It may be logistically impossible." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice changed. It lost its diplomatic polish and gained something ancient, something terrifyingly solid. It was the voice of a species that had looked into its own darkness and had drawn a line. "But humanity does." A different kind of silence fell. This one was charged, confused. Ellerin froze, turning back slowly. "Diplomat Park, what are you saying?" Una touched the console before her. A secure priority channel opened, its encryption noticeably more robust than the standard common system. She was not addressing the council anymore. She was sending a message. "Humanity hears you. Gentari of Melody 7, Una said, and every word was a promise hammered from steel. Your call did not fall on deaf ears. It fell on ours. Hold on. Just hold on." She cut the channel and looked back at the stunned council. The Avixi representative chirped in confusion. "What can you possibly do? Your fleet is weeks away at best. Your home system is on the opposite side of the core." A faint, cold smile touched Una's lips, but it never reached her eyes. "You have maps of our official fleet deployments. You have charts of our trade lanes. You think you know where our strength lies." She gathered her data pads. "You are mistaken. You know our face. You do not know our fist." Without another word, she turned and walked from the delegation station, her heels clicking a firm, deliberate rhythm on the polished floor. The eyes of the galaxy followed her, a mix of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, uncomfortable suspicion. The Grand Chancellor, a venerable being of light and energy, pulsed with subdued colors. The human has made a declaration she cannot possibly fulfill. It is a cruel kindness. Ellerin, still standing at the podium, felt something stir in his chest, something he thought had died. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was the faint, fragile memory of what hope felt like. He looked at the spot where Una had been. He did not see the boasts of a young diplomat. He saw the absolute certainty in her eyes, the certainty of someone who had just lit a fuse. On Melody 7, in the root cellars and the hidden caves, the last free Gentari huddled. Their comm unit, nearly out of power, had picked up the tail end of the Commons broadcast. They had heard their ambassador's resignation. They had heard the cold calculus of their abandonment. Then, through the static, a different voice, clear and human, had cut in. A simple, impossible message. Hold on. A Gentari child, clutching her mother, whispered, "What does it mean?" Her mother, listening to the distant, terrifying whine of crawl harvesters drawing closer, held her tighter. "I do not know, little one." But it was not a goodbye. Above them, in the cold dark between stars, a ripple began. It was not a ship entering faster than light travel. It was the absence of something massive slipping out of it, like a predator emerging from a depth where light and sound dare not go. The message had been sent. The promise had been made. And across the void, a silent switch was thrown. The silence in the lunar command center was a physical thing. It was not the quiet of inactivity, but the dense, focused stillness of a predator poised to strike. The curved main display, which usually showed a tranquil view of Earth or the bustling lunar docks, now displayed two things. On one side, the final horrific images from Melody 7 played on a loop silent. On the other, the stern, resolved face of diplomat Una Park faded, her last words, "They are summoning our fleet," hanging in the air. Admiral Min-Soo Kim stood before the display. He was a solid man, his hair more gray than black, his face etched with lines that spoke of decades spent under artificial lights staring at star charts. His uniform was simple, devoid of the flashy metals many other species favored. The only insignia that mattered was the small, platinum shield pinned over his heart, the symbol of Project Paladin. He did not look angry. He looked like a man reading a complicated equation that had finally resolved into a single, unavoidable answer. He turned from the display. His voice, when he spoke, was low and calm, carrying to every officer in the pit, "Janus, confirm status of the silent fleet." From the air itself, a neutral, genderless voice responded. It was the sound of pure data given sound. All vessels of Battle Group 1 are at Condition 0. Stealth systems are nominal. Reactors are at standby for immediate dark translation. Crews are at battle stations. We are holding at the L1 Vale. A junior communications officer, a young man named Jay, looked up from his console, his face pale. "Admiral, we are receiving frantic queries from the Galactic Common Security Council. They are demanding an explanation. They say any unilateral action risks a galactic war." Min-Soo's eyes didn't even flicker. Acknowledgement. Message received? No further response. He walked down the central aisle of the command pit, his boots making no sound on the soft flooring. He stopped behind the station of his tactical coordinator, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s named Ji-Woo. "What is the crawl strength at Melody 7? Ji-Woo's hands moved, pulling data onto her screens. 1 Harvester-class command ship, 6 Reaper-class escort destroyers, 12 smaller picket vessels and ground assault carriers. Standard reaping formation. They rely on speed and terror. No meaningful orbital defenses. They weren't expecting company. And our response package? The Vindicator is flagship, supported by the heavy cruisers Bulwark and Bastion. 2 squadrons of Wraith-class stealth fighters. 1 battalion of the Titan Legion in drop pods. It is a surgical instrument, Admiral. More than enough to break the siege. Not enough to invade crawl space." Min-Soo gave a single, slow nod. "It is exactly enough. This is not a war of conquest. It is a message. Load the Sanctuary Protocol." Throughout the command center, officers exchanged glances. The Sanctuary Protocol was not in any standard fleet manual. It was part of Paladin. It was the operational heart of their hidden doctrine. On the main display, the view switched. Now it showed the bridge of the UNS Vindicator. Captain Tay, a man with a shaved head and a calm, immovable presence, looked back from the screen. "Admiral, we are ready. The Gentari distress call is being broadcast ship-wide." "Good," Minsu said. "Your crew must understand what they are defending. Not territory. Not resources. The principle. The Crawl believe the universe belongs to the strong who take. We must prove it belongs to the strong who shield. They targeted the helpless. This makes the mission clear. You are not going to negotiate. You are not going to issue warnings. You are going to remove the threat. Completely." On the Vindicator, Captain Tay turned to his own crew. "You heard the Admiral. Signal the fleet. We translate in 60 seconds. Fighter lead, Lieutenant Hana, are your wraiths prepped?" A younger woman's voice, crisp and focused, came over the ship-wide comm. "Ghost Squadron is ready, Captain. Plasma lances charged. We have the surgical strike profiles loaded." Hana sat in the cockpit of her fighter, a sleek, angular craft that seemed to drink the light around it. Her hands rested lightly on the controls. She was not thinking of glory. She was thinking of the grainy image of a Gentari child, frozen in fear. She pushed the image away, letting it harden into purpose. Below, in the drop pod bay of the Bastion, Sergeant Minsu of the Titan Legion checked the seals on his powered armor for the third time. His squad, 12 men and women encased in 2 tons of ceramic and steel, waited in the ominous red light. Their mission briefing had been brutally simple. Board the harvest ships. Secure the hostages. Destroy all harvesting equipment. Leave no Crawl operational in the capture zones. It was not a battle plan. It was an extermination order for a specific evil. Remember, Minsu's voice growled through the squad's internal comm. They are not soldiers in a war. They are butchers in a slaughterhouse. Our job is to stop the butchery. No hesitation. Back on Lunar Command, Admiral Minsu Kim watched the countdown tick to 0. Janus, authorized dark translation. Execute Operation Paladin. There was no grand flash of light. On the view screens, the distant, hidden fleet did not leap forward. It simply vanished from its holding position. It slipped into a layer of space-time the Galaxy Common Science did not fully understand. A human development kept secret for this exact reason. They did not travel through space. They moved beneath its notice. The Galactic Commons messages became more frantic, then confused. Their long-range sensors had detected the human fleet's energy signature at the L1 Veil. Then it was gone. Not scattered. Not cloaked in a way they could detect. Just absent. The suspicion in the council turned to cold unease. What had Unipark meant? On the bridge of the Vindicator, reality folded back around them. The stars returned, but they were different stars. Ahead, hanging against the velvet black like a bruised fruit, was the planet Melody 7, and between them and the planet, glowing with the cold green lights of active harvest beams, was the Crawl fleet. Captain Tay studied the tactical overlay. The Crawl were in a lazy predatory formation, their ships angled towards the planet, their backs to the dark. They felt utterly safe. He saw the harvest beams, like vile umbilicals, connecting the ships to the surface. He thought of what was happening at the other end of those beams. All ships, he said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. Drop stealth. Power all weapons. Target assignment is live. Do not wait for my order. Execute the Sanctuary Protocol the moment you have a solution. Throughout the human fleet, a single command was given. The advanced stealth systems, which had hidden not just their forms, but their energy signatures and quantum noise. Disengaged at one moment, the space near Melody 7 was empty. The next, it was full. The UN's Vindicator did not decloak. It manifested, its 2-kilometer-long frame blotting out the stars, its hull a matte gray that seemed to swallow light. To its port and starboard, the cruiser's bulwark and bastion appeared with the same shocking suddenness, their rail cannon turrets already tracking. Around them, like deadly sparks, the wraith fighters of Ghost Squadron winked into existence. On the surface, in a dark cellar, the Gentari child heard her mother gasp. The Krull harvesters had gone silent. A new sound, a deep suboral hum, was vibrating through the very ground dot in orbit. On the command deck of the Krull harvester, Overseer Vral froze, a cup of stimulant halfway to his lipless mouth. His sensor officer let out a screech of pure confusion. What is this? Where did they come from? Vral demanded. Before an answer could come, a human voice, filtered through a translator and stripped of all emotion, echoed across the general Krull fleet frequency. It was Captain Tay. Krull forces. You are engaged in crimes against life. You will power down your vessels and surrender immediately. You have 10 seconds to comply. Vral stared at the tactical screen, now screaming with red hostile icons that had appeared from nowhere. His shock curdled into rage. These were humans. A minor noisy species. This was a bluff. A trick of light. Destroy them. He screeched. All weapons fire. Protect the harvest. The 10 seconds ticked down to 0. Overseer Vral's command deck was a place of sharp angles and dull red light. The air smelled of ozone and a bitter, acidic scent that was uniquely Krull. He had been watching the harvest progress with a sense of deep satisfaction. The yield from Melody 7 would be exceptional. The fear-charged neural tissue of the Gentari was a delicacy and a powerful stimulant for the Krull warrior caste. It was also an excellent way to remind the soft, chattering species of the galactic commons of their true place in the universe. As prey, his long, bony fingers tapped a rhythm on the arm of his command perch. On the main viewer, a feed from the surface showed his gatherers. A group of Gentari, their wide eyes glistening with terror, were being herded by drones towards a processing chamber. Their soft cries were like music. This was the natural order. The strong took. The weak were taken. The commons, with its endless talk, had proven this by their silence. Their lack of action was a louder confirmation than any broadcast signal. Increase the extraction rate on Sector 4. Vral clicked to his subordinate. The central herd shows promising biochemical distress readings. Prime quality. Yes, Overseer. A chime sounded. It was the passive sensor station. The officer there tilted its head, a gesture of confusion. Overseer. A minor spatial distortion. Very close. It reads like a sensor ghost, perhaps a micrometeor swarm. Vral waved a dismissive hand. Ignore it. Focus on the harvest. The commons will send their thoughts and prayers, not warships. He allowed himself a low, guttural chuckle. The idea was absurd. The humans had made some noise, of course. They were emotional, like all young species. They would learn, as others had learned, that morality was a luxury for those with power. Below, in the tangled, glowing roots of the great bioluminescent trees, a small Gentari child hid. His name was Lirin. He had seen the beams of light take his older sister. He had run, his small hooves slipping on the soft moss, until he found this hollow. He was alone. He had a small device, an old music player his mother had given him. It could also send a simple repeating signal on a childhood frequency. A game they had played. He pressed the button, his voice a trembling whisper. Please, anyone, please. He didn't really expect an answer. It was just a thing to do, a tiny light to hold against the crushing dark. Above him, the line of a Krull patrol skimmer passed, its searchlight slicing between the trees. He held his breath. Back on the harvester, The sensor officer's confusion turned to alarm. Overseer, the distortion is not dispersing. It is cohering. Multiple points. Massive energy signatures building from nowhere. Vral spun his perch. What? Show me. The main viewer flickered from the surface feed to a tactical map of near-orbit space. For a second, it showed only the crawl fleet icons, glowing a confident green around Melody 7. Then, like stars being born in fast forward, red icons blossomed onto the screen. 1, 3, 6, a dozen more smaller ones. They appeared not on the edge of the sensor range, but inside the fleet's defensive perimeter. It was as if they had simply stepped out from behind a curtain of space itself. Panic, raw and unfamiliar, shot through Vral. How? Where did they come from? Identify them. The identification software struggled, then locked. The spectral analysis, the power readings, the quantum signature, it all pointed to one source. Human. The largest icon was tagged UNS Vindicator, Dreadnought class. It is impossible. Vral shrieked. Their nearest fleet is weeks away. This is a trick. A hologram. But the energy signatures were real, spiking off the scales. The human ships were powering weapons, their reactor outputs climbing from 0 to combat levels in a heartbeat. Then the voice came. It was a human voice, translated into harsh crawl clicks, but the tone was unmistakable. It was cold, flat, and final. It gave a 10-second ultimatum. Rage replaced Vral's panic. How dare they? How dare this pathetic species interrupt the crawl harvest? This was an insult to the natural order. His mandibles clacked in fury. Destroy them. He screamed. All weapons fire. Protect the harvest. Show these animals what true strength is. Across the crawl fleet, turrets began to swivel. Green plasma gathered at the mouths of cannons. The smaller picket ships surged forward, their commanders eager for a fight they believed they could win. On the bridge of the Vindicator, Captain Tay watched the 10-second countdown reach 0. The crawl response was immediate and aggressive. Energy spikes flared across his tactical display as their weapons charged. He felt no surprise, only a grim confirmation. Sanctuary protocol is live. All units engage. What happened next was not a battle. It was a demolition. The crawl fired first. Bolts of searing green plasma lanced across the void toward the human ships. The bulwark and the bastion moved. They didn't dodge. Their point defense networks activated. A storm of hypervelocity tungsten slugs met the plasma bolts, detonating them in silent, blooming flowers of wasted energy kilometers short of their targets. It was like throwing pebbles at a tsunami wall. Then the human fleet returned fire. It was not a volley. It was a symphony of coordinated destruction. From the bulwark, a single magnetic rail cannon fired. There was no bright beam, just a faint ripple in space. A moment later, the lead Crawl Reaper-class destroyer simply came apart. It didn't explode. It shattered as if an invisible giant had hit it with a hammer. The round had punched through its shields and hull like paper, the kinetic energy liquefying the interior before the structure failed. From the bastion, focused laser batteries stabbed out, slicing through the engine clusters of 2 more destroyers with surgical precision. They drifted away, dead and dark. But the true horror was the Vindicator. Its main weapon, the gravity anvil, activated. Space around the Crawl Harvester command ship warped. Light bent strangely. Vral's ship shuddered, a groan of straining metal echoing through its halls. Then the pressure came. It felt like the universe itself was squeezing. Support beams buckled. Consoles imploded. Vral was thrown from his perch as the artificial gravity failed. He floated, disoriented, watching through the cracking viewport as two of his escorting cruisers were dragged into the effect. They didn't collide. They were compressed. Their hulls folded in on themselves, crumpling like foil balls in a fist, before erupting in a brief, silent fireball. On the surface, Lirin the Gentari child felt the ground shake. The awful whine of the harvesters had stopped, replaced by a deep, thunderous hum that came from the sky. He peered out from his root hole. Up through the canopy, he saw flashes. Not the familiar green of Krull weapons, but sharp, actinic blue and white. He saw a Krull picket ship, a tiny speck, suddenly glow red-hot and break in two, the pieces tumbling down in a long, slow arc. A new sound reached his ears, transmitted through the ground, a series of deep, resonant booms from high above. He clutched his music player, his heart pounding. He pressed the button again, his whisper now mixed with a desperate hope. "Please, are you coming?" In orbit, the fight for space was already over. The Krull fleet, so confident moments before, was a disorganized cloud of wreckage and dying ships. Their weapons had proven useless. Their tactics, based on terrorizing the defenseless, were meaningless against an enemy that fought with calm, overwhelming force. But the human operation was not finished. The Sanctuary Protocol had two phases. The first was to shatter the orbital threat. The second was to end the atrocity on the ground. From the bellies of the human cruisers, new objects fell toward the planet. They were not bombs. They were drop pods, sleek and black, trailing fire as they pierced the atmosphere. They fell like meteors of justice, aimed directly at the Krull groundside processing facilities. The message was clear. The humans were not just winning the battle in space. They were coming down to the surface. They were coming to where the helpless were. And they were coming without a shred of mercy for those who had shown none. The silence that followed the human ultimatum was brief, shattered by the shriek of Overseer Vraal's order to fire. On the bridge of the UNS Vindicator, Captain Tay watched the Krull energy signature spike. He felt a cold clarity. They had chosen. Now they would learn. Sanctuary Protocol is live. All units engage. The space around Melody 7 erupted. Green Krull plasma bolts, meant to gut unarmed colony ships, streaked toward the human vessels. They never arrived. The point defense networks on the cruiser's bulwark and bastion came alive. It was not a shield, but a storm. Thousands of hypervelocity tungsten rounds lanced out, intercepting the plasma in a series of silent, looming explosions that lit up the dark like short-lived green stars. The display was beautiful and terrifying, a wall of fire that said, "You shall not pass." Before the Krull could process this, the human fleet struck back. This was not an exchange of fire. It was an execution. From the bulwark, a single magnetic rail cannon discharged. There was no dramatic beam, only a subtle ripple in the fabric of space. A fraction of a second later, the lead Krull Reaper-class destroyer ceased to exist as a coherent structure. A perfect round hole appeared in its center, edges glowing white-hot. Then, as if in slow motion, the entire ship expanded outward and burst apart into a cloud of molten debris. The kinetic force had vaporized its core. The bastion's Ceph-focused laser arrays stabbed out next. They were brilliant, coherent lines of light that played across the engine nacelles of two other destroyers. Where the light touched, armor vaporized. Internal explosions tore the ships open from within, their drives flickering and dying. They became drifting, lifeless tombs. But the true instrument of terror was the Vindicator. Its main weapon, the gravity anvil, did not fire in a conventional sense. It activated. A sphere of distorted space, visible only by the way it bent starlight, bloomed around the Krull Harvester command ship. Vraal's vessel shuddered violently. Alarms became a single, sustained scream. Then the pressure hit. It was not explosive. It was implosive. The ship's hull, designed to withstand the vacuum of space, groaned in protest as an invisible force began to crush it. Support beams in the corridor outside the bridge snapped like twigs, whipping through the air. 2 escort cruisers, caught at the edge of the field, were dragged inward. They did not crash. They were compacted, their hulls folding and crumpling in a horrific, silent ballet of destruction before their reactors breached, swallowing them in a brief, furious sun. On the surface, the world shook. In his hollow among the roots, the Gentari child Lirin curled into a ball. The shriek of the harvesters had stopped, replaced by a deep suboral thunder that came from the heavens. He dared to look up. Through the glowing canopy, he saw the flash's brutal blues and searing whites. Not the sickly green of the crawl. He saw a crawl ship, a distant speck, suddenly glow from within like a lantern before splitting in two, the pieces trailing fire as they fell. The booming sounds that followed vibrated in his chest. He fumbled for his music player, his small hands trembling. He pressed the signal button, his voice a mix of fear and a hope so fragile it hurt. "Please, are you coming?" As if in answer, new stars fell from the sky. They were not exploding ships. They were pods, black and sleek, trailing pillars of flame as they tore through the atmosphere. They fell with purpose, aimed at the heart of the nightmare, the crawl processing facilities dot in the main harvesting compound. Crawl ground troops heard the orbital fury cease. Their communications were a chaos of panic and static. The overseer was gone. Their ships were gone. Before they could formulate a plan, the sky screamed out the human drop pods hit the ground not with explosions, but with earth-shattering impacts. They drove deep into the soil like colossal nails, forming a perfect circle around the compound. For a second, there was silence. Then, with explosive charges and the shriek of tearing metal, the pod hatches blew off. What emerged was not an army. It was a force of nature in powered armor. The Titan Legion Marines, led by Sergeant Minsu, stood 2.5 meters tall in their hulking suits. Their armor was matte gray and angular, devoid of color or heraldry. Their helmet visors were blank, dark slabs. They moved with a speed that belied their size. Minsu's voice was calm in his squad's ears. Primary objective: secure living hostages. Secondary: destroy all harvesting equipment. Weapons free. No crawl in the compound walks out. The crawl troops, armed with plasma rifles designed to intimidate and torture, opened fire. Bolts of green energy spattered against the Marines' armor. They scorched the paint. They did not penetrate. The Marines did not flinch. Minsu raised his own weapon, a heavy rotary cannon. The sound it made was not a rifle crack, but a sustained, deafening roar. The stream of high-caliber rounds tore through the crawl barricade, through the troops behind it, and into the wall of the facility beyond. It didn't just kill. It erased. The Marines advanced. They did not take cover. They did not shout war cries. They moved in grim, methodical silence, their weapons speaking for them. They breached the main processing hall. The sight inside would haunt them, but it also hardened their resolve into something diamond-hard and cold. Shantari of all ages were held in force field cages. Conveyor belts led to shining, horrifying surgical tables stained with iridescent Shantari blood. Crawl technicians, not warriors, scurried for tools. Hostages first. Minsu ordered. 2 Marines moved to the control console, their armored fingers delicate on the keys. The force fields flickered and died. The Gentari inside flinched, expecting more pain. A Marine named Hana, her voice modulated to a softer tone through her external speaker, knelt before a cage of younglings. She retracted the armored gauntlet from her right hand, revealing a human hand. She reached slowly forward. "It's over," she said, the translator in her suit working. "You are safe. We are taking you out of here." A little Gentari, braver than the rest, touched her human fingers. The Marine then did something unexpected. She gently removed her helmet. Her face was sweaty, her dark hair stuck to her forehead. She was not a monster or a god. She was a young woman, her eyes filled with a furious compassion. She placed her helmet over the Gentari child's head, shielding its eyes from the horror of the room. "Don't look," she whispered, while the hostages were led out by 2 Marines. The rest turned to the secondary objective. They did not simply disable the harvesting machines. They unleashed a systematic, thorough destruction. Rotary cannons melted surgical arms. Grenades vaporized tissue storage units. Flamethrowers purged the conveyor belts. They left nothing behind that could ever be used for this purpose again. Any Crawl who raised a weapon or tried to flee was cut down. Those who dropped their tools and cowered in corners were ignored, left to be captured later. The Marines were not there for slaughter. They were there for eradication of the machinery, of the threat, of the very idea that this could happen without consequence. Above, the aerial fight was concluding. Lieutenant Hana's ghost squadron of Wraith fighters, nearly invisible against the stars, finished the cleanup. They moved like ghosts, their plasma lances slicing the engines off the last fleeing Crawl picket ships, sending them spinning helplessly into the gravity well to burn up in the atmosphere. On the bridge of the Vindicator, Captain Tay surveyed the tactical map. The red hostile icons were gone. The orbital space was clear, save for drifting wreckage. The drop pods reported mission success. Hostages secured. Facilities destroyed. He opened a channel to Lunar Command. "Admiral Kim, Sanctuary Protocol is complete. The threat to the Gentari at Melody 7 has been removed. The Crawl fleet in this sector has been eliminated." He paused, looking at the planet below, now free of the parasitic green lights. "We have sent the message." Down in the root hollow, Liren saw a shape blot out the stars. It was not a ship. It was a giant, a metal giant that landed with a soft thud that shook the ferns. It knelt before his hiding place. Its helmet retracted, and he saw the face of Sergeant Minsu, scarred and weary. But his eyes were kind. "Hey there," the giant said, his voice surprisingly gentle through the translator. "You the one who kept calling?" Liren, too stunned to speak, just nodded. The music player clutched to his chest. Minsu reached out a massive armored hand. "Your call was answered. Come on. Let's get you home." The battle was over. The rescue had begun. And across the galaxy, a new truth was now floating in the silent vacuum. Humanity's mercy was reserved for the victims. For the victimizers, they offered only a swift, absolute, and merciless end. The silence that returned to the space around Melody 7 was different. It was not the empty quiet of before the attack, nor the tense stillness of the human fleet's arrival. It was the profound, clean silence after a storm. The last flickering pieces of Crawl wreckage tumbled through the void, catching the amber sunlight before spinning into the dark. The green hell beams from the harvesters were gone. Below, the planet's surface showed only a few columns of smoke from the shattered processing facilities, already beginning to disperse in the gentle winds. On the bridge of the Un's Vindicator, Captain Tay watched the tactical screens. All hostile signals were dark. He gave a series of quiet orders. Begin recovery operations. Medical frigates, deploy to the surface at these coordinates. Engineering teams, assist with Gentari infrastructure damage. Keep a security patrol. The rest of the fleet, hold position. He then turned to his communications officer. Open a priority wideband channel to the Galactic Commons Council. Full visual. Route it through their main hub. Ensure it cannot be blocked. On Lunar Command, Admiral Minsu Kim received the notification. He gave a single, curt nod. The message was ready. It was time for the galaxy to understand what had just happened and why in the vast, ornate chamber of the Galactic Commons, the mood was one of shocked confusion. Their long-range sensors had picked up the catastrophic energy spikes in the Melody 7 system immense, brief and entirely one-sided. Then silence. The Krull fleet's transponders had vanished. The human fleet, which had seemingly disappeared from their own sensors, was now broadcasting a strong, clean signal from the heart of the battle zone. When the main holographic display flickered to life, it did not show Diplomat Una Park. It showed Admiral Min-Soo Kim. He stood on the command deck, the curved viewport behind him displaying the peaceful curve of Melody 7 and the glinting, organized shapes of his fleet. His face was grim, his eyes like chips of flint. "People of the Galactic Commons," he began, his voice even devoid of triumph or anger. It was the voice of a man stating a simple, unavoidable fact. Approximately 1 standard hour ago, the Shantari colony of Melody 7 was facing extinction. A Krull harvest fleet was engaged in the systematic vivisection of a sentient pacifist species. You, the Council, determined that a military response was logistically impossible. He paused, letting the uncomfortable memory settle over the listening ambassadors. Humanity disagreed. The Gentari are now under the protection of Earth. The Krull fleet in this sector has been destroyed. Not disabled, not driven off. Destroyed. Its capacity to ever harm the helpless has been permanently removed. A ripple of something horror, awe, fear passed through the chamber. The Telleran ambassador stiffened. The Avixi let out a low chirp. They watched as a brief, edited feed played on a side screen. It showed no gore, no suffering. It showed the shocking emergence of the human fleet from nothingness. It showed the precise, devastating fire that dismantled the Krull warships. It showed the drop pods striking the surface. It ended with a Marine placing a helmet over a Shantari child's head. The contrast was more powerful than any propaganda. Min-Soo's image returned, larger. He leaned slightly forward, and his gaze seemed to pierce through the light years. Let this be a lesson. To the Krull Imperium, and to any civilization, empire, or individual who shares their philosophy. His voice hardened, each word falling like a hammer on an anvil. You believe the universe belongs to the strong who take. You are wrong. You believe mercy is weakness. You are wrong. You believe that targeting those who cannot fight back is a safe, profitable strategy. He paused again, and the silence in the Commons was absolute. You are wrong. When you target the helpless, you do not summon our pity. You do not summon our debates. You summon our fleet. And we will arrive. We will arrive without negotiation, without warning, and without mercy. This is not an act of war. It is the enforcement of a law older than your empires. The strong must shield the weak. This is Project Paladin. The shield is now a sword. Account for it. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the ambassadors in stunned silence. The implications crashed over them. Humanity had not just won a battle. They had declared a new galactic principle, backed by terrifying, unseen force. They had a fleet that could appear anywhere, unseen, and erase a battle group in minutes. And they would use it not for conquest, but for this justice. On Melody 7, the work of healing began. Human medics in clean white and blue armor moved gently among the traumatized Gentari, treating wounds, offering food and water. Engineers helped repair damaged homes. The Gentari, at first trembling and wary, slowly understood. These giants who had fallen from the sky were not new masters. They were guardians. They had come, as promised, in a clearing near the broken processing compound The young Gentari Lirin stood with Sergeant Minsu. The Marine's helmet was off. Lirin pointed a trembling finger at the massive bioluminescent tree he had hidden under. Its roots had sheltered him. Its branches now glowed softly in the twilight. It heard me, Lirin said softly through a translator pendant a medic had given him. The tree. It heard my call and told you. Minsu looked at the majestic tree, then down at the small, brave child. He nodded slowly. Yes, it told us. He made a decision. What is your name for this tree? Lirin thought. It is the great listener's tree. From today, Minsu said, his voice gentle but firm. Its name is Yuna's stand. It was a name the Gentari would adopt and cherish. A symbol of the diplomat who had first said hold on. Weeks later, in the war rooms of the Kroll Imperium, the atmosphere was not of rage, but of cold, calculating fear. Overseer Vral was gone, his entire fleet lost without a single survivor. The data recovered from passive scouts was terrifying. It showed a form of warfare they could not comprehend, stealth they could not detect, weapons they could not counter, a doctrine of total, immediate annihilation. A senior strategist, its carapace dull with stress, presented the findings to the High Command. Analysis confirms. The human silent fleet operates on a doctrine they call Paladin. It is purely reactive, triggered by attacks on defenseless targets. Engagement is inadvisable. They do not seek to capture territory or resources. They seek only to destroy the attacker, completely. The High Commander, a being of immense age and cruelty, studied the reports. It saw the recordings of its ships being crumpled by invisible forces. It saw the methodical butchery of its ground forces. For the first time in its long predatory life, it felt not the thrill of the hunt, but the chill of being prey. A new line was etched into the Kroll strategic manuals, a line that would be taught to every commander. Beware the silent fleet. Beware the shield that strikes. On Earth, there were no victory parades. The news of Melody 7 was released to the public. People watched the same edited footage the Commons had seen. They saw the emergence of their hidden fleet. They saw the rescue of the Gentari child. They did not cheer Got in city squares, in homes, on space stations. Humans stood in quiet groups. They felt a solemn, fierce pride, a profound relief. It was the pride of a person who has made a hard promise, and despite the cost, kept it. The promise was simple. Never again. Not on our watchdot in a quiet office at Lunar Command. Admiral Minsu Kim and Diplomat Yuna Park looked at a star map. Gentari space was now marked with a small, platinum shield icon, the symbol of Paladin. They will test us again, Minsu said, his voice quiet. I know, Yuna replied. But now they know the price. The helpless are no longer alone. That is the message. And the message echoed. Through the trade lanes, the diplomatic channels, the dark corners where predators plotted. A new factor existed in the galaxy's equations. A sleeping giant had not awoken. A guardian had simply removed its cloak. The law had been written in the fire of Kroll wreckage. Target the helpless, and you will meet the one species in the galaxy for whom mercy and vengeance were two sides of the same unbreakable shield.